All right, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our June Advocates Network meeting. I'm happy to see some of the folks that are here every month. We've got some newer faces, which is great. As I said, I will just do some of the intro and then pass it over to Tracie and Representative Bacon for the majority of the meeting. And then at the very end today, we will just provide an update on where things stand with the graduated income tax ballot measure. So I'd love to have everyone introduce themselves in the chat. Again, if you would like to change your Zoom name to show your pronouns or change anything about your name, this is how you would do that. But I'd love to just see who's here today and where you're all joining from. So please add those intros in the chat. And I'll just remind folks of our community commitments. So in this space, we remind each other to make space and take space, depending on how you usually show up in a space like this. Of course, none of us knows everything here, but we have a lot of really awesome, experienced advocates here, and together we know a lot, and we're here to learn. And finally, we want to presume positive intent in the things we are saying and doing in this group, and also acknowledge the impact of our words and our actions. I'll just give a quick intro to Great Ed and a reminder of what our Advocates Network is, and then pass it along. So Great Education Colorado's vision is that through public education, every student across the state, regardless of their background, their zip code, the color of their skin, the language they speak at home, any of their identities, that they graduate prepared to lead their best life. And we do this by harnessing the power of grassroots activism and diverse, inclusive networks to guarantee that our public schools across the state are welcoming and that they're adequately, equitably, and sustainably funded. And of course, this meeting is our monthly Advocates Network meeting. The Advocates Network is our community of folks like you all and many more who are working to make sure that we are realizing this mission and vision in Colorado. And the Advocates Network is really where we collaborate and help prepare people to become confident education advocates and work together on all the advocacy that we are all already doing. And just as a reminder, we always meet on the second Tuesday of the month at 4:30 on Zoom. So Delana just dropped the link for next month's meeting in the chat. All right, so that was just kind of getting some stuff out of the way, but now I am really excited to pass it over to our first of two special guests today. We are joined by Tracie Rainey from the Colorado School Finance Project. And Tracie's going to give us an overview of what exactly happened at the legislative session, particularly as it relates to school finance. So Tracie, I will pass it to you.
Great. Well, thank you. It's always nice to be here. Molly, who works with me, is going to be putting up the slides and sharing them. We've also have these slides available on our website. And so in preparing for today, I thought I'm just going to do a very quick overview of kind of the School Finance Act itself. With Representative Bacon here, obviously she can go into many more details as well. But school finance this year was introduced on the first day of the session, and it ended on the last day of the session. So it was a kind of difficult process. But for those of you that don't know who we are, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization supported by school district contributions. We're made up of a board of which Lisa Weil represents the parents around the state on our board, so it's great to have her. But we try to provide information that is easily used for school districts and for advocacy groups, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel on things. And so if you're ever looking for something, please feel free to reach out. The next slide, please. So the school finance bill itself this year, um, after lots of conversation at the state and funding, and could this be implemented at the next incremental, was able to be adjusted and move forward with the plan that had been put in place the prior year. And so this was a challenge for the legislature because of the tight budget situation. And so just a few highlights to talk about is if you remember, school districts were averaging at having 5-year averaging. And then in 2025, they moved it to 4-year averaging as they implemented 15% of the new formula. So it's really important to note that a district can't get less than what they got in 24-25, and they're getting a fraction of this new formula. So even though when it is fully implemented, the weights for at-risk, ELL, and special ed will be 0.25. They're getting a fraction of those dollars currently. The other thing that wanted to be addressed in the bill that's currently in place until July 1 is to really look at the charter schools and make sure that charter schools were getting funded based on the demographics of their who was attending their schools. So that work was also done over the interim, and you'll see that reflected in the school finance bill that passed this year. So going to the next slide, please. When we go to school finance for this year, the bill was introduced, like I said, at the beginning of the session, and they were able to implement it at 30% and go to 3-year averaging. So I know I've had lots of people ask me, why are school districts making cuts when they are implementing the new formula? And that's because going from 5-year averaging to 4-year to 3-year has really made it difficult for districts to be able to manage their change in enrollment during this time. Inflation was at 2.4%. But we know we'll get another forecast next week. There will be 2 more forecasts before the legislature comes back, and they will need to look and see where inflation actually is and see then what that looks like for the following year. And most likely we'll have to make an adjustment. One of the things that they did in the new formula was to create a new factor called the locale factor, which was to reflect um, really the challenges of getting to and from some communities. And in doing this, they used information from the National Center of Education Statistics in order to look at how they looked at making changes to remoteness and size of school districts. This was put into our formula, but it needs some tweaking, and there's going to be some rules that are coming out this year, starting after July 1, for a district to ask for a variance from moving from one locale factor designation to another. The next slide, please. One of the other things that was added into school finance this year was thinking about what happens when they implement the formula at the next level, which is at 45%. And instead of going to 2-year averaging, is there a way to move to something that is kind of in between 3-year averaging and 2-year? And so they did come up with a possible solution to that, which is a district can use their current year enrollment, use 97% of the prior year enrollment, or use the weighted average of the prior 3 years at various percentages. Again, it's really important to remember that this will only go into effect if they can implement it next year at the 45% level. The next slide, please. And so that's really the highlight of the formula having to do with school funding. There was a variety of other things that got added to the Finance Act that will have some impact on districts based on homeschool, based on enrichment programs, based on charter school allocation now. So those dollars will actually go to mirror what was the school demographic, not just the district average. But one thing I wanted to highlight, and I'm glad that Representative Bacon is on, is the fact that both the House and the Senate, as you can see here, by wide margins, passed the joint resolution supporting the full funding of public schools and really looking at the adequacy studies as being kind of that shining light in the future to target focus for. And so, with that, the next slide is just my contact information and happy to have you reach out at any time with any questions. But I'm more than happy to turn it over to Representative Bacon so that she can add her comments in on this, as I know it was a really challenging year, and thank her for all her work.
Well, thank you, Tracie, and thank you to everyone here on this call. I do believe that I've met many of you, and your presence in the Capitol building has really helped shape what we got passed in a very difficult budget year, but also it reminded us what our values are and how many of us truly wish to not only lift up public education in K-12, but in our context, quite frankly, to protect it. And so this year, thank you so much, Tracie. Um, Whenever I want to know if 2 + 2 = 4, I call Tracie Rainey, and she assures me it does, because sometimes um, my colleagues want to believe that 2 + 2 = either 5 or -2. And sometimes it's not lost on us how legislators need to actually understand our formula, and they need to understand how it fits into the budget. And so for those of you I have not met before, my name's Jennifer Bacon. I represent Colorado's House District 7. I have the privilege of serving on the House Education Committee along with Judiciary. And I was one of the co-sponsors of House Bill at the time, now I think it's 2024, 1448, where we restructured our financing formula. And so in the times where we're facing a $1.5 billion budget hole, it was really important for us to, one, not just protect K-12, but it turns out between the legislature and the governor's office, no one wanted to see a BS factor return, even though in the beginning there were a few ideas that came from the first floor, if you will, the governor's office, that probably would have just recreated the BS factor. And so, for any of you who followed it, for example, we talked about specific operating tax, right? We talked about two or three different things to figure out how to save maybe around $200 million of the state's obligation. And at the end of the day, our budget committee came through to protect K-12 and the new finance formula where we're able to put additional dollars in. But I will say that next year does not look better by way of our financial prospects. However, the one thing that should be an asset to us is this time for us to not only see what we believe the projections will be, but quite frankly, we had an experience this year of shaving $1 billion off the budget, which means I think we have a good idea of what the state of our budget is, and that we have to figure some things out because this is just untenable. It is not sustainable to operate like this as a state, not just for K-12, but for everything. We had very difficult conversations over healthcare, for example. So what I'd like to just point out is when I think about, for those of us who have been following the Get It Done work, there was a sequence. We wanted to first highlight how K-12 in Colorado is inadequately funded. Then we wanted to get folks to a place where they would pledge to support, if you will, to actually combat those findings and figure out how we could adequately fund K-12. And so we're looking at between last interim for me and this interim with having spent some time with the Get It Done campaign. Last interim, we were able to meet with a few stakeholders, along with a couple of legislators, not a couple, but a handful of legislators, to ask, for example, school leaders, superintendents, and our wonderful PTA, for example, if we had uh, the $3 billion in K-12, what would we do? And we needed to get insights on what those in the landscape thought about that question to help set ourselves up for the next phase, right? Which is to not only find the funding and get the funding, but then to create a blueprint for what would we do if we had the funding. And so in the last interim, we spent a lot of time trying to just hear what the experiences were for families along with districts. And the top three things were fully fund special education. I don't know if any of you agree or disagree with that. We also recognize the importance of actual intervention and the need to support students in gaining. And then we talked about, and this is not necessarily a category, but the thing that popped up is really understanding uh, why operating under Tabor and inflation, making adjustments per inflation, it's not actually what was happening in schools. And so, uh, needless to say, this is what I say now in regards to that. If our school funding formula was set to 1992 for inflation, well, in 1992, I was using chalk. In 2026, we would have 2026 chalk money. But guess what? No one's using chalk. People are using Chromebooks. And that's not inflation. You know what I mean? And so that's what we spend a lot of time understanding on behalf of school districts. They're like, we do now understand the needs and costs for mental health. We do not have nurses. We want to upgrade our technologies, harden our schools. And so it's one thing to say we're $2 to $3 billion inadequately funding K-12, at least to the level that we said we wanted to commit to. But it's another to hear, like, if we got these dollars tomorrow, what would we use it for? And so what was critical this session was to address our budget deficit, but also to support our communities in understanding not just the budget deficits for K-12, but for all of us here in Colorado. And we certainly got help from DC with the passage of HR 1. So people, unfortunately, had to personally and deeply feel these cuts. But we also wanted to say, as Democrats, and at least I'll speak for my caucus, now that we know, on top of the things that we were inadequately funding, now that we know what we're dealing with in DC, this has to be the time where we talk to our constituencies about how we will support ourselves with funding the things we need to see here in Colorado. Therefore, what kind of adjustments will we make to the way that we bring in revenue to really get where we need to be? And so with that, we see, in addition to Initiative 195, which is the graduated income tax, we also saw Senate Bill 135, which is now Proposition NN. What both of them do is address our system and how our system is really handcuffing us as Coloradoans in our systems for being able to get not only the adequacy, which, you would think would just be the standard, but to get us where we should be, where we deserve to be, where we should be in 2026, and what it is that we need to do to support all of our kids. And so the great thing about both initiatives is that they address the issues from the angles that we need to address. The first is, how do we restructure our tax code to be modern, to actually bring in the revenues that we need to support this state? And that is what the graduated income tax initiative does. And I'm sure many of you have heard about it, but this is the time for us as our constituencies to say, the way that we bring in revenue should be proportionally fair. And that's what it does. And because we have not been able to bring in revenues in a way that is proportionally fair, we have not been able to adequately fund K-12. We have not been able to fix our roads. We have not been able to maintain our parks because our tax code was not proportionally set up to be fair, which was the point of the folks who pushed it in the early 90s, right? And what Senate Bill 135 did by way of Prop NN, it takes on the Tabor cap and says, you know what, we don't have to actually raise our taxes. Why don't we just use what we brought in and prioritize K-12 and our kids? And so what both of them do also is they prioritize the health of our communities. And both of them have really strong overlap. First, in supporting K-12, both of them prioritize funding K-12. Then they both prioritize supporting kids, particularly in early childhood, and any of the things that they need to support young people's well-being so that when they enter school, they can learn in the ways they deserve to equally and equitably learn. And then with the additional resources we bring in, we will lean into what we know we need to prioritize, which is our healthcare and then the health of the state. And so I will say for the legislature, you know, folks just wanted to support our communities and they resigned to the fact that we can help ourselves. And rather than live in tension, we want to live in a conversation, and we will support both of these efforts. Because again, what we know, having kind of borne the weight of trying to manage the state with $1.5 billion hole just this year, that we cannot operate like this anymore. And so we wanted to support as many people as we could by saying, this is a worthy endeavor. So I'll end with this, you know, thank you for listening to my chalk in my 1992 to 2026. We don't need 2026 chalk, you know? But we also know that we need educators who can afford to live here, who can support our kids. We know how much it costs to live. We know how much XYZ. And we all felt in the building that if this is not the time where we can say to all of our neighbors the things that we know, and the only way to help us move forward is by our own decisions, then we'll never have an opportunity like this again. And so what comes with this, with both of these issues being on the ballot in November, now in this interim, we get to jump back in and actually figure out, how do we plan for the blueprint? Both of the initiatives leave it up to some extent, the legislature to figure out how to get those dollars into schools. And for us, this is more than an opportunity to think about funding. We also have an opportunity to learn from what we prioritize and figure out if there are any key shifts that we need to make now that we may have the ability to bring the revenues in to support our kids. And so hopefully we can pick up from where we left off with the last interim. Because like I said, last interim, we were interrupted one more time with another special session. Actually, they're no longer special, family. I don't know what we're going to do. I just, you know, I know we're all friends here, but on the other side of Jared Polis, we'll see how an interim actually goes. Okay. Right. But now we're in a better place to understand that we have opportunities to bring revenues in. So how do we plan for an additional, you know, $1 to $3 billion, depending on the time frame, right, that we can bring into our budget? And so we hope to go back to visit some of the folks we talked to in the interim, but also figure out if the interests still stand, if the needs still stand, right? Special education funding, intervention, new costs for schools, so that we can make the tweaks necessary and really lean into this opportunity. So I'll stop there. Thank you all so much for listening. I do hope that made sense. But we're really looking forward to the fall.
Thank you so much, Representative Bacon and Tracie. I want to give a moment for everyone to maybe digest what we've just taken in. And if anyone has questions they'd like to ask of either speaker, go ahead, Caitlin.
Hi, thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Rep Bacon, for all that information. I appreciate it. I was just wondering, I have had some conversations with, obviously in Jeffco, we're pushing for a mill levy override, obviously supporting 195 but I have heard some chatter about CEA not supporting 195 and really pushing for N. What do I say to naysayers? How do we get everybody on the same page? I think I've heard people say that they're worried about getting signatures in red districts for 195 and that stuff. So I just kind of, to me, I don't see why we can't just go for it all. So if you could help me kind of get into that, I would appreciate it.
Well, I can share. So thank you for the question. It's been asked a few times, and in the legislature, what I shared with you is what we believe as well. I think, for what it's worth, as a sponsor of what is now Prop NN, we met specifically with Josh with the bell, right, to talk about how these issues interplay. And we came to the space, and quite honestly, it was the legislators who were like, we need these both to work together. And so, in talking to their teams, they also talked with CEA. At some point, we also talked to other organizations like Gary Community Ventures, right? We all came to a place of trying to understand how these initiatives work together, as well as how we're going to talk about them. And that's how I talked to you. So, hopefully, that landed, right? I'm like, at the end of the day, this is about us all because everyone came together a year ago to be like, we have to do something about the lack of revenues that we have at our disposal. And what these two things do are, like what I said, it restructures our tax code and allows us to address our actual Tabor cap. And so I can speak for the legislature in the sense that I can tell you, we did all sit down at a table, right, to talk about how we're going to move through these things. And then we did have to hammer out some of the things that we heard in the beginning. For what it's worth, I'm carrying a graduated income tax petition as the sponsor of Senate Bill 135, you know? And that is because of what I just shared. I think, too, like in the beginning, there were some clarity on tensions, and many of us worked to kind of quell that, including grade ed. It was really important to hear some feedback and to have CEA say out to its members, we are not engaging negatively, right? We encourage you all, if you want to participate, which is why I'm carrying as well. So that much I can share, at least from my perspective, in the spaces that I was in, if that's helpful.
Yes, that is. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Jerry. And thanks, Caitlin.
Yeah, a lot of you know that I'm very involved in CA, very frustrated with CEA as far as this goes. I actually spoke, somebody's knocking on my door, but I spoke with Kevin Vick this past week, who is still not on board with 195. And he feels that NN is the solution. I don't know if the numbers that he was talking about are accurate because he said something about bringing in over 7 billion over 10 years and then keeping it at 2 billion a year. Uh, I mean, I agree with the fact that I think we need both. And I think it would be a big asset to have CEA behind it. And I'm not sure what we can do to convince leadership at CEA to get on board with this. He did say he would support it if it got on the ballot. He then said to me, it's not going to make it to the ballot, which is very, very frustrating. And
Yeah,
I
well,
got to see who's at my door.
sorry. Well, that's disappointing. I imagined there was a world where these things were questions, but,
Hey,
like I
I'm on a
said,
meeting. I'm not sure what's going on.
oh, sorry. Um, I think for us, like I said, between myself, Senator Bridges, even in Rep. Lukens, we had these sit downs to be like, for us, both of these constituencies are important to us. For many of you who followed the conversation, like I said, in the beginning, everyone was in the same place. And there is something real to be said about which approach, right? Our groups who all came together, it's thriving community, right? And I don't want to speak for, and I know Lisa and the Great Ed team are here. And that was part of the reason why there were divides on which approach. And for us in the legislature, we were like, this is not what we contributed to. What we are interested in doing is supporting all of our constituencies. And many of us really do understand this $1 billion hole. So we will work this way. And so for us, it was like me, Lukens, and Lorena Garcia spoke regularly to try to be sure that we had language to talk about how both of these passed, as was the request of our colleagues, right? And so what I do know is this: to the extent that any one of us can make decisions, I know what it is that I want to work for. And I think many of us can decide how we can support. I do think even carrying the petition and talking about the income tax measure is important to help our constituencies understand, Tabor's a long game. We've all been there. And so we need to talk to people about what they're experiencing by way of affordability on these issues and what we can do to solve it. And so the last thing I'll say is, I still have ongoing conversations with CEA because we're going to talk about how do we move Prop NN forward, and anything that needs to be put on the table, I'm happy to bring forward, because we can't pit these, we have other things, you know what I mean? There are plenty of other people to pit us all against, and it can't be this. And we have great neighbors and constituencies who want to support. We cannot contribute to the confusion. We cannot contribute to the confusion. If we cannot seize the opportunity, and that's the only way to talk about it without losing sleep. You know what I mean? The HR1 and this budget situation are dire. I just can't explain. There are not enough words. And if we can at the very least talk to our neighbors about why gas is $4.69 on top of all of these things, and that we should at least give it a go, then we fail as leaders, in my opinion. I'll speak for myself, but I don't have a problem talking to CEA. You let me know what you're comfortable with me talking about, okay? Yeah, I appreciate you though, but please let me know.
Go ahead, Jerry. Thank you.
So this is kind of, it's not the two initiatives, but it's the third initiative that I am seeing people, I'm assuming they're paid petition carriers, this lowering the state income tax.
Yeah.
And my concern is if it gets on the ballot and that passes and 195 passes, what happens?
Yeah, that's a real issue for the courts. For what it's worth, when we all go to the title boards, even though they have to, just vet the question themselves, we all get the memos of like BT dubs. All of these things are out there. It always, we love citizen initiated statute and whatnot, but this is the risk of it. You know what I mean? So yeah, it'll be an issue for court. The interesting thing is what Prop NN does, it just says we can retain revenues regardless of what the tax rate is, right? I think that there is a little bit of something these days with people understanding the relationship between income taxes and, schools and water and electricity and fill in the blank, And so even though electricity, yes or no, depending on the day, right? But I do think people understand that while lowering income tax feels great, especially for all the folks who've moved here from places with much higher income taxes, I do think some people are like, well, we can't vote ourselves into oblivion. You know what I mean? And so the legislature had to get above, it's not even that. The contractors have this transit petition. I saw the paid petition outside of my grocery store. He had 8 petitions, and I talked to him for 20 minutes. I'm like, y'all, do you even know what this means? But one of them's like $750 million to go to roads. And I was like, how much money do you think we have? If it's $750 million to grow, that's $750 million that's not going to schools. And if you lower taxes, this was my actual conversation. If you lower taxes and take $750 million out for roads, this is a basic math problem. How much do you think is left? Where do you think we're going to get it from? You know what I mean? So we had to pass a whole bill to reset our entire state's fee structures, to bring our balances under the taper cap so we could somehow halfway survive if that, initiative passed. But the issue with that is our taper cap, which is why we're like, maybe we should try both ways, putting something on the ballot. You know what I mean? But they're crazy. I mean, God bless us. We don't know what it's going to take. I mean, when people start feeling the impacts of the budget decisions that we just made, they'll know. Like, we're sending out letters like, you do not have access to caregiving reimbursement because we do not have the funds as a state. So hopefully that helps. But there's a lot of them out there that are, tell people to not vote for that contractor thing either, please. So like, we passed that initiative for $350 million for law enforcement last year. We just had to push and put that in every corner. We're like, at least it didn't say by when, because that's the only way we got through. We're trying to figure out where $350 million was going to come from. When the governor was proposing, maybe if we change SOT, we can cut $200 million from K-12. $350 million, $200 million. You know what I mean? It's terrible. Sorry. Soapbox.
Thank you so much for those questions and for your responses, Representative Bacon. Donna, did you have your hand up, or does anyone else have a question?
No, I was just going to say that we had DemFest this past weekend, and we'd had both the CEA and the graduate income tax people come to the Colorado Democratic Education Council, and we're for both of them. But I had I'd emailed Chris Degree Kennedy and Liz Waddick about giving me materials. I didn't realize that the CFI had a table at DemFest, but give me materials so I could hand them out at our table, at Democratic Education Initiative. And it's interesting because I emailed both of them at the same time, and I would hear from Kennedy, but I didn't hear from Waddick. And maybe it was because they didn't, and I don't know if they were there or not. I didn't see them, but maybe they weren't ready to work together at that point at DemFest. That's all. I also go to my King Supers, and I've got people on both ends of the door that are there with 6 and 7 initiatives that, include all the ones that Rep. Bacon was just talking about. And I also had a conversation. I told the lovely young woman, I understand this is your job, but I don't support them. And other people that were stopping. I mean, now you go to the grocery store, for a dozen eggs, and you're going to be in a political debate, at the front. So another guy and I were talking to her and talking to each other. I mean, it was kind of fun, but, and I said, I wouldn't sign that one. And he didn't, but then he signed another one. So,
Yeah.
they're out in full force. Yeah. So, but I hope both 195 and then whichever it was, I hope the CEAs, I hope they both go through.
It's good times at the grocery store. In my district, I'm like, I know where you land on this income tax. Do you want to pay less? And then I was like, the guy goes, if you could sign one out of these 8, which one would it be? And I don't know. I think where I left off was looking at, was it like sales tax for conservation efforts, sporting goods?
Yes,
There's something of
that
it,
was
right?
in there. That was in there.
And I was like, well, it's not going to be the following.
Yeah.
So, and then people are like, Rep. Bacon, what are you doing out here? And I'm like, I just came for avocados. But now we're going to
have a town
are
hall.
doing over clementines. What should we do? I was like, sorry.
You guys, I'm in a loud car, but I do have a question on the lowering of income tax initiative. What are the items that they have to list that will be impacted by a reduction?
Yes. Does that have to be on the bat or in the blue book somewhere? All I saw was like a paragraph. It's not even long. It's like, shall it be 4.1 or something like that, right? What is it? It's like,
Christy,
it's still
I
a
don't think
4.
they have,
Yeah.
They
I
don't have
don't
to do that?
believe no, they just have to show what the overall reduction, but not how it would be reduced, because that's a legislative decision.
Okay, thanks. But, one of the things that you can talk about with that, and maybe you already said this, I apologize, is like the people carrying the petitions that only make, 25,000 a year, 30,000 a year, their taxes are going to go down significantly with 195. And if the other one passes, I guess if we both pass, theirs would still go down to 3.7. Is that right? It would just be
Well,
the upper ends that would have to stay at 4.4?
It'd
it
probably
would,
have to
so
get sorted out through the courts.
yeah, that's what we were saying earlier. What happens if both of them pass?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Christy and Tracy. Any other questions or closing thoughts for Representative Bacon or for Tracy? Okay, hearing none. Thank you both so much for being here. It's always a real joy to get to hear from both of you and learn from your expertise. And Representative Bacon in particular, I just really appreciate the energy that you bring to this work. And I always feel so much more energized after listening to you remind us that we can do it. So thank you.
We got to do it. We got it. We got this, fam. But
We
let
got
me
this,
know
fam.
how I can support. Thank you all so much for always showing up. On behalf of the kids, the teachers, parents, everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Well, that is a very tough act to follow. I do have a bit more information to share, though, for the next 10 to 15 minutes. Representative Bacon perfectly teed up. She already spoke to this slide that I was going to share, so I won't belabor the point, but I do just want to highlight that many of you on this call today and folks who may watch the recording later or, folks in Great Ed's network have been with us in this work for years, or some of you are somewhat new to it, but have been very staunch supporters. And I just want to be sure that we recognize all of you and to say thank you to all of you for being in this work with us. As Representative Bacon laid out, and as we have on the slide here, we did this together. We got the adequacy studies commissioned by the state. We spent, the last year and a half sharing the results, and we've gotten our both the House and the Senate to pass resolutions. The Senate has now passed 2 resolutions committing to the full and fair funding of public schools. So those of you who were on our Advocates Network meeting last month, we took a moment to just celebrate that we have accomplished this all together as education advocates from places around the state. This really would not have been possible without all of you volunteers that are in this work. So I just want to express my thanks. And Lisa, unfortunately, couldn't be here this evening. She's in another meeting. But Lisa has, been in this for decades as well. And so I will do a round of applause for her in her absence and let her know that we all appreciated her as well. But now I want to keep talking about the graduated income tax measure as like the next very important step in this plan. So I'm actually going to go back and just highlight. Now that we've, done these 3 things in our Get It Done plan, as we've pointed out, the next step is to secure more funding for education, and then to, in this interim time, continue thinking about how we will use the funding once it is secured. So I believe almost all of you on this call today are circulating petitions for us for the graduated income tax measure. Thank you so much for that. We have been out and about across the state, super busy doing this work. I'm sure you are eagerly awaiting some numbers and updates. So I can share that we have handed out enough petitions for over 115,000 signatures. As a reminder, we need 125,000 valid signatures to get on the ballot. So, we'll need more than 125,000 signatures because they won't all be valid to count towards the measure. So out of this almost 120,000 signatures that we currently have out circulating in the field, we have about almost 35,000 signatures turned in. So we are super optimistic and excited about all of the systems that we've built. There is a lot of engagement and interest and energy from our volunteers. And we know that really in the next 6 weeks is the time for a big push, and that it's really all coming down to this time. We have almost 900 people circulating petitions for us, which is amazing. Some of those are staff members from our, the 21 organizations on the steering committee for the coalition, but hundreds of them are volunteers, and most of you on this call are volunteers that are circulating. So we are super excited again with the interest that we have pulled in with this campaign. And again, just really emphasizing that we can absolutely do this. And now is really the time in the next few weeks for us all to collectively lock in and just get it done. This is a picture here from DemFest on Saturday. We had some people from various organizations in our steering committee there. And we've got a lovely picture of Lee and Dr. Joyce Brooks at, actually, a shout out to Stephanie Mason on the call. This was at the opening of her new museum at the Paris School. So we've got staff and volunteers out and about and petitions with them. Super grateful for all the work that you all have done. And I just wanted to provide an update about where we stand in terms of our signature verification. So we have, of all of the signatures that are turned in, we have over 20,000 verified already, and we have lots of verification shifts coming up in the next few weeks. So this number will continue to tick up very quickly. I want to highlight that our highest performing Senate districts, the top one is SD 31 right here in Denver. This is my district. I'm pretty sure it's all because of me. Just kidding, obviously. Then our next highest performing district is Senate District 14. Shout out to DJ and a lot of the folks that we have in the Fort Collins area that are consistent members of our advocates network, and just really working hard on this. Thank you. And Senate District 13 has really snuck up as well in our rankings just in the last couple of weeks. And that is largely because Lisa Weil, Great Ed's executive director, has helped pull together a really amazing group of advocates in Greeley that are connected to the school board and to the education community. And they have been working super hard and honestly setting a great example for the rest of the campaign. So we'll be sharing some tips about the infrastructure that the community has set up. Go ahead, Evie. I see you have your hand raised.
So the last time I was working on signature verification, we only had about 15,000 verified so far, but they said that there wasn't a single Senate district where we got the minimum number of signatures that we need. Is So when you talk about the highest performing, you're saying we got 76% of the required ones, which are just like 2000 something, right? Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes. So I think it's about 2,600 required signatures. It varies a tiny bit district to district, but yes, we are. That's correct, Evie. So
I was
on the other,
dismayed that there wasn't a single one that we had enough. I thought it would be better than that. I'm just, but these really low performing ones, oh my God, we have a lot of work to do.
yes, yeah. And I think your point is very well taken, Evie, that this is kind of going to what I was saying a bit earlier, is that we have a lot of folks that are excited about this, and we are waiting for people to sort of deliver on these petitions and packets that they've taken and the work that people have committed to. Our organizations are working super hard. Our volunteers are working super hard to get this done. And so we also know that I want to be clear that this is how these ballot campaigns, especially ones that are largely volunteer run, go. It's not unusual that we'd be seeing these kind of numbers at this point in the campaign and then still get on the ballot. So I want to light a fire in everyone here and also let folks know that we absolutely are still going to do this. And, it's not, I don't want folks to feel like all hope is lost or anything. This is like on the trajectory of where other campaigns have been at this point. And this just helps us figure out like where we really need to focus. Yes, Jerry, please go ahead.
Do you have the percentage for Boulder? Because I mean, Boulder's always been great about passing mill levies and supporting education, but we're obviously not in the highest performing. I'm curious where we're at.
Sure. I don't have it up. Let me see actually if I do. Which Senate district in particular, Jerry?
I'm in 10.
Okay. I think 10 is actually in Colorado Springs. So sorry, just to clarify, this is
I'm in House District 10. Okay.
yes.
God, I can't remember what Senate district. It's
Let me
Judy Amaboli's district.
oh, okay. So 18 perhaps is Senate District 18 includes Boulder and is 48% of the way there. So
Okay, we're getting there.
fairly
Right.
even with Greeley, but those folks in Greeley, like I said, have kicked it into high gear just in the last 2 weeks or so.
Sounds like we need to do that too here.
Yeah. And so this, I hope that this conversation feels like an invitation to those of you who are on the call. I know a lot of you are already working super hard to make this happen, and we are so grateful. And we have the day for us to the last day for us to turn all of our materials into the Secretary of State is August 3rd. So we have a little bit less than 2 months to continue pushing on this, give it all of our focus and energy now that people are done with school and graduations and sports. There are things coming up in the summer too, but we have the events that come with summer offer really great opportunities as well. So there are Pride events every weekend for the next couple of weeks. We have lots of Juneteenth events coming up in Denver and around the state. There are farmers markets, concerts. Here I have a slide about this actually. Oh, I'll come back to the school board resolutions. But Delana just dropped a link in the chat for where people can sign up for particular events that the coalition has identified as priorities for signature gathering. We also have a giant spreadsheet of events that are happening all across the state. So we've just sort of put the highest priority ones on this sign up genius. But if you have if you want to go to a particular area and have questions about events, or if you want to help cover one of the smaller events, please let me know and I can help coordinate that and look on this big list that we've been crowdsourcing. Yes, Donna, please go ahead.
Yes, I've been out of town a lot, but I'm here for most of the month, the rest of June, and then the end of July. But I missed the trainings. But having been a candidate who petitioned onto the ballot, I understand a lot about that. So, I mean, I could carry ballots too, just as I go about my day, but I have not been qualified to do that. So, is there an opportunity to do that still?
Yes, absolutely. Donna, I will send you an email personally to get you connected with all of that. But yes, we are still we're still doing several weekly trainings for petition circulators. For folks like yourself who have been through this process before, we can do an abbreviated, just sort of reminder of things that you need to know. And yeah, Delana dropped the link in the chat to sign up to share this circulator training opportunity. So if you
and this is not just, I mean, I had to get Democrats, but this is anybody, right?
This is anybody, and it's anywhere around the state. It doesn't matter, what your home district is or what area you're in. Anyone who's a Colorado voter can sign.
Okay, I'll look this up.
Yeah, and there was something else I was going to say, but I guess I will. Oh, I was just going to let folks know that these events, in general, the audience at these kind of big events that we have happening in June, like Pride events and Juneteenth events, are usually pretty friendly and very willing to sign. And I will give an example that I was at Erie Pride on Sunday by myself, and I got 160 signatures just by having a couple clipboards with me there. So not everyone needs to go out and do that every weekend, but also if you did, we would get to the goal a lot sooner. So let me go back and, because I skipped ahead a bit. I just wanted to give a quick update as well about some of the things that Great Ed has been focusing on, and CSFP and others in the education community. We have gotten 3 school boards already to pass a resolution supporting the graduated income tax measure. We have, I'd say, maybe 5 districts that are planning, as far as we know, to pass a resolution endorsing the measure in the next week or so. And then we have at least 10, potentially more districts that are considering passing one, again, before their summer recess. And if they aren't able to do it now, they are interested in doing so in the fall when they reconvene. So one of our opportunities for you all, in addition to gathering signatures, is to help us connect with your school board and with other people in your community to encourage your school board to pass a resolution, because this can be really helpful in just getting the word out to the community. It can help push some of the larger state level organizations if they see that we have a large presence of school boards that are interested in this. And I want to also make sure, we've shared this before, but I want to make sure everyone has access to the district, school district fact sheets that Delana just dropped in the chat. So we've been working with Susan Meek and Brett Miles from Spark and Compass, names that will probably be familiar for those of you that have been in this work. They have created fact sheets for every single school district across the state, showing what percentage of taxpayers in that area would get a cut, and a conservative estimate of how much money this would bring in for the school. So we have Jeffco here as an example. Jeffco is one of the districts where we're hoping we can talk with the board about passing a resolution. And that is one of the things that we would love all of your support with. So I'll be reaching out to you. This is a picture from the Adams 12 school board last week where they passed a resolution, and a big shout out to Christy on this call for making that happen in Adams 12. And I see that we are past 5:30, so I'll just wrap us up quickly. Thank you so much for joining the meeting today and for staying longer. As I said, we'd love to have you join us and gather signatures at some of the big upcoming events in the next 2 months. And I'm also happy to help you find something that makes sense for your schedule and your area and all of that. And the last thing that you can do to help us get this across the finish line is to make direct asks of your friends and your colleagues and your neighbors to have them carry petitions as well. Posting information on social media always helps, but is also easier sometimes for people to ignore and think that someone else will do it. So we'd love to have people do a combination of direct asks and just sharing information. And if you are part of any sort of community group or organization, getting information shared through that organization is super helpful too. I put this picture on here because most of the people in it are my friends that I asked very kindly and directly to carry a petition. And we went out to Edgewater Pride on Saturday and had a great time. As we've said, now is the time really for us to be pushing on this. We're also making calls to all of our volunteers that currently have petitions. So if any of you would like to help us make some of those calls, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat again. And in closing, I just want to reiterate something that Lisa Weil has been saying a lot. I'm sure you all have heard this before as you've worked with Lisa over the years, and she feels it particularly about this graduated income tax measure. We absolutely can get this on the ballot and pass it in November, and it's up to all of us if we will do that. And so what are we each individually going to do in the next 2 months to help us get over that finish line? It's, what are we going to do individually? How are we going to reach out to our networks and our organizations and help us get there? And with that, just a reminder for folks to register for our next Advocates Network meeting in July. This will be right before we have everything submitted to the Secretary of State for the graduated income tax measure. So we'll probably have some last minute strategizing to do in like the final areas that we want to focus. So thank you all so much for being here, and I'll stay on for a few minutes if anyone has any questions. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Take care.